Welcome, everybody, to the latest episode of the Union Federation here on the Fandom Podcast Network and on the BQN Network. In this episode, we are here to talk all things Strange New Worlds as we're counting down to the final episode of this current season. We're already at episode 9, All Those Who Wander. Now, for this particular episode, I definitely need some crew backup because it gets a little creepy around here. And of course, that means I have to bring in my top-notch security officer, the man who knows all too well about eggs and especially Gorn eggs. I think he might have had a few before this podcast, so I can't promise what's going to happen to him between now and then. He, of course, is also the co-founder of the Fandom Podcast Network, my brother from another mother, Mr. Alien himself, Kevin Reitzel.
Did you hear that? What was that sound?
Wrong movie, friend. Wrong franchise, Kevin.
I got my little alien figure here. How's it going, man? Did you hear that sound? I just heard something move. Don't know.
I just want to make sure you don't have any like acid reflux going on, a little grumbly in your tummy there or something like that for this episode.
I was inclined to wear one of my favorite Star Trek shirts where it shows the Gorn and it goes going, Gorn.
Oh, yes. Well,
I just had the feeling I had to wear it in this episode.
Yeah, I don't know why. I think we're going to be talking about the Gorn quite a bit, but you know what? I need a top-notch backup on this episode, and I can't think of anybody better who has been not on this show or any show on the Fandom Podcast Network for far too long, and we are so happy to have him back. He is the one, the only, Mr. Davis Grayson.
Hi,
Yay.
Kevin. Hey, Kyle. How are y'all?
We missed that dulcry sound of Mr. Grayson's voice on the podcast.
How are you doing, sir? Good to have you
Wonderful.
back, man.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to talk about Strange New Worlds. What an exciting TV show.
Yeah, in fact, let me ask you, Davis, before we get started on covering the most recent episode here, All Those Who Wander, what are your thoughts so far on Strange New Worlds now that we are about 8 episodes in? And what have been your thoughts about what a lot of people were very excited about as maybe the best new addition to Star Trek in a very long time? What are your thoughts as far as what you've seen with Strange New Worlds?
Strange New Worlds, in my opinion, is probably the best Star Trek that's on right now. Hands down.
Right. Wow. I think that a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah.
What is standing out for you so far with Strange New Worlds? What's gotten you pulled into it so strongly?
Well, you see a lot more of the characters that are human. I mean, let's take a look at Captain Pike, who has already seen his future, which may or may not be written in stone. Has said that a couple of times, but he continues to be that captain, and he continues to be the captain that is needed for the Enterprise. And how cool is it to actually have your own captain make dinner for you? So, I mean, it's one of the cool things. And I love how cool the different characters are, that they bring their own uniqueness and skill sets to the table, which is actually really cool so far. One of my favorite characters so far happens to be Ortega's.
Yeah, no, that's one of the things. It's been the cast is what's been making this show for me as well.
Are you going to say the thing, Captain?
Yeah. So no, it's been a wonderful experience so far, and I'm very excited to see what they're going to do with the season finale. But we got an episode to talk about here, gentlemen. So without further ado, before we get into anything, I have to do this. That is right. Spoiler warnings ahead. We are about to go all Gorn for the latest episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Kevin's excited. He's got a shirt. What can we say?
I got more to say about the Gorn.
It's going to be a fun conversation. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, let's activate that quantum drive and get into the latest episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Okay, so we are here to talk about episode 9, All Those Who Wander. It doesn't pay to wander in episodes like this. I'm going to say it usually does not end well, but let us get into the latest edition of the Captain's Log, giving you the episode synopsis. The Enterprise is en route to Deep Space K-7 when it receives another assignment: investigate the missing USS Peregrine. While Number One and Ortegas remain on Enterprise, the rest of the bridge crew and several security officers take shuttles to an ice planet where they find the Peregrine crashed on there, mostly intact. Hemmer and Uhura restore Peregrine's systems. Pike searches the captain's logs and discovers the ship was carrying 3 refugees. One had damaged the ship after realizing he was infected with Gorn eggs, which hatched, burst from his chest, and fought him. Another meets a similar fate after the medical staff are unable to discover Gorn life signs. As the Gorn kill the security officer, Spock conjectures the Gorn had evolved to evade Starfleet sensors. Noonien Singh observes some hatchlings fighting each other until the strongest one wins. The crew turn the last hatchlings against each other, but not before a Gorn lays eggs in Hemmer's body, leading him to abandon the crew for the planet's cold, a sacrifice to prevent the eggs from spreading. The crew mourn Hemmer and leave the ice planet aboard the Peregrine. Noonien Singh resigns from Starfleet to help the surviving refugees. Guys, this episode had all kinds of feels and all kinds of different action in it. Give me your gut first reactions after you watch this episode and the credits started rolling. Mr. Grayson, you are here as our guest. We are going to give the floor to you to give your first reactions to this episode.
First reactions was bittersweet, mainly because, we lost Hemmer, but we also lost Noonien Singh as well. And, if you look at how everything works out, the ensign that was promoted to a lieutenant, he also died as well, and the other cadet died as well. So, it was not a successful mission, so to speak, but it was a completed mission.
It is. It was definitely on the darker side of Strange New World episodes, Kevin.
It was, and we'll get into the reasons why and the ties and tribute to other science fiction. But yeah, it was dark, and it's funny because when we were doing a couple of recent episodes of the Orville and Union Federation, there was a couple of dark episodes there as well. But I like the fact, and this is one of the things that you kind of touched on there, Davis, was that each crew member is having a moment maybe in someone else's major crew arc of the episode. We're getting all these wonderful character moments of them, working together and Anson Mount as Pike is just doing a great job keeping it all together, especially when the time is. But we're seeing everyone kind of have little moments, and especially with this particular episode where they don't shy away from death. Everyone was able to do something with this and take part of this episode. And I thought that's something that has been happening a lot in Star Trek Strange New Worlds. And in my opinion, is the best new live action series, which is saying a lot because I was really looking forward to the Picard series. And that hasn't quite panned out exactly the way I wanted. It's great to see some throwbacks to obviously the TNG, and Mr. Patrick Stewart is great, but I'm getting the episodic continuity connection of Star Trek that I miss in Strange New Worlds.
Yeah, I think here too with this particular episode, it's going to lead in. There's events that happen in this episode that are going to lead to things that are going to affect this show going forward, and as far as certain character introductions, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But guys, I want to talk about the cast a little bit here in this episode because everybody got kind of a moment to shine. We're going to save Hemmer for a little later in the episode, but one of the things that I really liked about this episode too is obviously we had some great stuff with Noonien Singh with her issues with the Gorn. We had some great moments with Uhura. But we had a really interesting moment with Spock in this episode where Spock has to give into his emotions to get what needs to be done. And it was Kevin, it felt a little Incredible Hulky in the aspect like he couldn't get his control back once he gave into his anger emotions. And I was just curious, I thought that was a great way to performance by Ethan Peck. What did you think of that? And was there anybody else within the cast this week that stood out for you?
That scene with him losing his control. Obviously, we've seen that in different versions and iterations of Star Trek on film, whether it was the movies and the whether it was the original series or the 2009 Kelvin timeline, we've always seen where Spock's emotion is shown outside of his Vulcanness, and we see his human side. But what I was seeing during that scene was me at a couple of low moments in my own life losing it, and seeing Nurse Chapel, knowing that she has feelings for him, being there as not just as a nurse, but as a friend, and giving him perspective that, look, you're half human, bro. It's not a curse. It's going to happen. Just, learn to deal with it and accept it. And that's what makes you you. And I want to mention that you and I, Kyle, we weren't the biggest fan of, at least I wasn't, of the Omega episode where the whole crew got to have fun on the ship and dress up in outfits and do stuff. And there was some issues I had with that episode on how the overall message was great with his struggle with his daughter. But I like that he had a moment in this episode that reflected back to what just happened, of watching his daughter finally leave him, outgrow, and not being able to be there to nurture his daughter through the formidable years of when a young girl really needs her father. And how I wished, that was conveyed a little bit more, but he gets the moment in this episode of the little lost girl. And I'm just going to call her Newt right now because I can't remember her name, but she's basically Newt from Aliens. And how he sees what this little girl needs after just losing his own little girl. And that's what was the heartbreaking thing for me in that previous episode that I didn't get, that I wanted to. I didn't like the way the story was told when it came to that aspect, that he lost his little girl, man. And he sees some connective stuff happening with this little girl and the guidance that she needs. And that was just a quick little scene thrown into this bigger episode with Hemmer and Uhura. And I thought it was important. And I had to give a shout out to that.
What about you, Davis? Was there anybody in the cast that stood out for you in this week's episode?
When we're dealing with Spock and he goes Incredible Hulk style with that, I also have to think that Sam actually helped trigger that, because he was like, you're not showing your emotions, you green-blooded so-and-so. And that's when Captain Pike, shunned him and said, enough, stop. But I think it hit Spock to that point where he was like, I need to do something. I want to show that I do have those emotions and everything, but you had to always keep that in check. But I mean, Sam Kirk has always been a surprise for me. And I love having him on board. I love having a Kirk on board. And it really shocked me when I was first introduced to him, because he always reminded me of the guy from Galaxy Quest at the very end with the mustache. What's his name?
Guy wasn't it like Guy?
Yes,
where he was always going to be the one who was going to be killed, and then at the end they make him the chief security officer. Yes.
But I mean,
Guy,
that was it.
Yeah.
But like you said, Kevin, I mean, this is a really Aliens, but also saw a little bit of Predator when you see the infrared.
Yeah, we're gonna get into that, but it's a good point. It was great acting by the cast all the way around here. One other thing I want to get into just real quick on this and see what you guys thought is the aspect we saw a new alien life form for the first time here. We had this alien that existed that wasn't part of the Federation. It was just a new alien race. And I just got to throw this out because the makeup on this character was phenomenal. And I mean, it looked like something the Henson Creature Shop put together. But you guys know who I'm talking about. So what did you guys think of that?
I thought it was great. The makeup, and also when the actor behind the makeup was starting to have the issue that we see that happens, it's very alien-like. It was fascinating to watch him. But I love that Star Trek can go to the makeup people, and they not have to rely on CG and do something really incredible like this.
Yeah. What about you, Davis?
I agree. I liked his name too. The little girl called him Buckley. And it was unique because I was hoping to be able to hear what type of species he is or who, where he actually came from. I mean, because it was just kind of that mystery surrounding it. Like the Orion, he was already infected, and then you have this guy get infected. And so it's just how they reproduce those Gorn. It's wild. Really is.
And it really is. And there's a lot of very interesting things that they use in this episode. But Kevin, you have found some things from our friends over at Den of Geek.
Yes, as we love to do. They do great articles on our favorite science fiction shows, including both Star Trek and the Orville. And we have Lacey Bauer, who I love her work, and she does a great job. And I want to refer to her article on this episode. Goes on to say, Star Trek Strange New Worlds episode review for all those that wonder. The penultimate episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 1 has it all. Jump scares, body horror, baby murder aliens, and our first real death. She goes on to say, the general episodic nature of Star Trek Strange New Worlds means that the show can much more easily play with things like tone and genre than either of its fellow modern-day predecessors. From last week's emotional gut punch disguised as a candy-coated children's fantasy to a body-swap romantic comedy, the show seems to be delight in subverting our expectations about what a show like is supposed to be and what it's supposed to do from week to week. Admittedly, season 1 episode, All Who Wonder, is a fairly big departure from the show's most recent handful of episodes, with what its overt jump scares, body horror, and murder aliens. And the hour has enough action to feel like a season ender in its own right. It's propulsive, thrilling, and generally creepy by turns, with plenty of legitimate stakes from multiple characters. Though I regret to inform you that I am now officially a Sam Kirk hater, even if it did come through for Spock in the end. Sorry, not sorry. What follows is an hour that feels like a cross between the Alien versus Predator films and a horror-themed bottle episode, as Pike and the rest of the crew try to come up with a plan to stay alive and get off the planet without taking any Gorn with them. For what I think is, for the first time, there are real deaths, or at least deaths of characters whose names and jobs we know, alongside the standard random cadet who is introduced just to be killed off. One of the best things about Strange New Worlds is his adherence to Pike's communal work-the-problem leadership style, with frequent results in collaborative brainstorms that feel like a breath of fresh air in a franchise where figures in his place are usually more into explicitly top-down style of management. And this is kind of reminds me of those Next Generation, when they would get into the ready room and discuss the options. And you would see Picard on there saying, options, anyone? But Pike is doing it through a real kind of like, not just a commandery way, but kind of like a supportive, fatherly, parental way. And just kind of bringing the crew together when the tension's there, like we saw with Kirk.
You bring up a great point about Pike. It's like he doesn't treat anybody like he's superior than them, even though he's the captain. He treats everybody like he's on equal level with them. But guys, I got to ask you real quick. I need to get on one of these Pike meals, because obviously the man is a phenomenal cook. I mean, come on, Davis. You know you need some of that bacon, right?
Absolutely. I mean, what other Star Trek shows, the captain not only being a great cook, but actually having a meeting at the same time while he's feeding his crew members. I mean, that's the best time to actually go over important items, is over dinner or breakfast or whatever. So I think the only other Starfleet captain that has done that has been Captain Sisko, and that was only like a one-time thing. But this has been more of a regular thing, and it's been refreshing to actually see that.
Yeah. So your brief thoughts on the horror angle of this episode, guys, and I'm going to get into the trivia segment when it comes to the aliens and Predator connection and similarities. But I just want to get your quick thoughts on this type of theme there, because it is a television trope. Sometimes it's done badly, sometimes it's done okay, and sometimes it's done really okay. Where does this kind of horror theme for this episode feel for you? Do you think they pulled it off? Let's start with you, Davis.
I think it is in the Goldilocks level because it is just right. Because you know that there are some characters who are not going to die because we already know their lives and everything. So, but there are a few that, they are going to, they might bite the bullet and die and everything like that. But I thought it was just enough where it was pretty intense, but at the same time, they were able to resolve it and not lose like everybody but two people. They were able to actually use their smarts, and everyone was able to go to different parts to be able to take on that assignment and do it in the proper way.
Yeah, I know we're going to get into more of the tropes that it gets into when we get into our away missions, but I do think they did a good job of pulling this off. And one of the things that I came out of this feeling like was this might be the scariest Star Trek threat we've had since the Borg were first introduced. And I think that doing this episode like that really enforced that. And we've had some tease earlier on in the season about just what's going on with the Gorn, but having this episode, I think it's when we talked about this the first time we really got into the Gorn earlier in this season. I love what they're doing in the fact that they're doing this slow build on the Gorn, and we're just not. We know every time we see them now, we see that they're a lot more dangerous, but we still know we haven't seen the full aspect of just how dangerous the Gorn are yet. And I love how they're handling that right now, Kevin.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great comment. I was when I was watching this, I'm going, okay, we got aliens theme here, but there was some moments in it that made it very Star Trek, and I think they did a great job with doing that. It's easy to kind of throw this episode out with the horror bathwater, so to speak, going, oh, it's their horror episode, but you really got to look. It's not just them fighting the alien threat and being scared with jump scares, but them working together, being creative. Of how to solve this, because if the original crew of Alien had really worked together more and paid attention and maybe talked with Ripley a little bit more, they might have been more people survived. But that was Ripley's story, obviously. But there's some really great moments with it. So Lacey Bauer goes on to say, my one complaint about this episode is that I wish we'd had a chance to know Hemmer better as a character before having to say goodbye to him. He's the one major Enterprise officer who has yet to really have an episode dedicated to his story, and while his decision to sacrifice himself for the safety of the crew is both moving and narratively relevant, he is, after all, fixing something that is broken. I can't help but imagine how much more upset I likely would have been if I had a firmer grasp on who he was. It was also a shame that the show decided to off its one alien officer who actually, looked like an alien. We'll bring that up a little bit more later regarding Hemmer, but I did want to mention that. And she says, on the plus side, I love that Hemmer's death and his dying exoneration that she should embrace life is apparently the catalyst that pushed Uhura to stay in Starfleet. And there's a certain poetic symbolism in the idea that she still lives on in some way, or that he still lives on in some way, though all the great and important things that she will go on to do in the Enterprise and elsewhere. I suspect that this is a mechanism by which Montgomery Scott will join the crew, but I honestly hope I'm wrong, if only because I'm nervous enough about the idea of James Kirk showing up next season in Strange New Worlds has repeatedly proven it doesn't need to be stacked with legacy cameos to work. I love the point that she made about with that scene with Uhura and Hemmer, that discussion before he dies, talks to her, and it was a great scene. So anyway.
I want to address from this article real quick, though, what the last thing that is talked about here with the mechanism of bringing possibly Montgomery Scott on, and obviously we know we're getting an Ensign Kirk next season as well. I'm curious for you guys, because we've seen how they've handled Uhura, we've seen how they've handled Spock as legacy characters that carry over into the original series. How do you, and we know this is inevitable, where some more of these characters from the original series are going to start popping up on this show. How do you feel about the bringing in of these characters as we go forward. Kevin, you're kind of shaking your head, so I'm going to start with you here because I know you've got some feelings on this.
I disagree with Lacey in the article. I think it's important to have them drop in and have a moment or two, because this is during the time where these characters from the TOS crew are finding themselves. And when it comes to Star Trek on the TV and movie medium, it's nice to see these backgrounds. And that's what I liked about the 2009 Kelvin series, is we got to see them in their academy days, right when they get onto the ship there. But it would be nice to see. There was a chunk of time there, though, that we didn't get to see, because it went like 4 years later or whatever it was, when that Pike convinced, after the bar brawl, to get Chris Pike to join Starfleet, to challenge him to do better. If you can show something creative and new about these young iconic characters for a few scenes or an episode or story arc, do it. Let's see someone else's interpretation of those characters, because I have not been disappointed by Ethan Peck's portrayal. I have not been disappointed by her character here. Celia Rose Gooding. Fantastic. Make it happen. Strange New Worlds has not proven me that they have misstep on that aspect. What about you? What do you think, Davis?
I completely agree with you. And mainly because this episode also proved that they were willing to take a chance to kill off a main character who was the chief engineer. So they took that chance. But to bring in Montgomery Scott, which we don't know for sure if that's going to happen like in the next episode or anything, but I agree. I think there should be some good renditions as long as they can write great stories. I say go for it. I mean, the one thing that I would love to see, and I don't know how they would be able to get away with it or do it, was, the original series was only 3 years. So that's 3 years of the 5-year mission. Why not bring in 2 more years and have them with brand new characters to be able to showcase like what else happened during that time? Now, mind you, it's not going to be William Shatner and company, but if the story is good and if the characters are like who they're supposed to be, like, for example, McCoy in Star Trek 09, I loved him. I thought he did a great rendition.
Carl Urban was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm still waiting to see, and tell me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Dr. Mark Piper also on board the Enterprise with Mbenga?
I'm trying to remember. It's been a while, so
I can't remember off the top of my head. Sorry.
Oh, no, no worries. I just remember that, and I just thought, but I love Mbenga. I mean, he's a great doctor. I love that so far.
Yeah. I think for me, I'm fine with most of the characters showing up on this. Kirk is always my concern, because I feel like the minute you bring Kirk on, it shifts the focus. It shifts some of the focus away from Pike, because it's Kirk. And yes, you might have some of this relationship that we don't know between Kirk and Pike that we're going to have. And so I'm not saying I'm hesitant about that, and I feel confident in Strange New Worlds writing room to execute this properly, but it's in the back of my mind. It's like when we get to Kirk, the dynamic changes a little bit.
Do you think that when we do get Kirk, Kyle, that we're not supposed to like Sam Kirk right now? Maybe we'll get a moment of maybe the reason why we don't like him. Maybe something happened or something. I don't know. Maybe there'll be some scenes between the Kirks. I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, it's hard to say, because I really don't know. And it's one of the things about this episode and what happens at the end of this episode with when you have Hemmer dying and you have Leon leaving the ship. And obviously I think we're going to see Leon back, maybe even in the season finale. If not, I think it probably the series finale, the season 2 series premiere, we'll see her back. But they've left uncertainty going into this final episode, and it's brilliantly done, because it's not this like, oh my god, cliffhanging uncertainty. It's like, are we going to find out who's going to fill these positions in the meantime? And I think that's interesting, and I think it's also set up where they can tell a separate story of Leon going forward that it will develop her character even that much more. So I'm excited for that. And like I said, if nothing else, the writing room of Strange New Worlds has earned our trust, and I'm willing to let them do the thing, as Ortegas would say. So, but right now, guys, we are going to take a quick break and tell you what else is happening on the Fandom Podcast Network. And when we come back, we're going to be discussing a little trivia from the episode, as well as teleport down for some away missions. But first, here is what's happening on the Fandom Podcast Network.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. We'd like to continue to feed your ears by inviting you to listen to these other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. It starts with our flagship show, Culture Clash, discussing the latest in entertainment pop culture. Bloody Kings, Immortals Take Notice, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theaters, where we celebrate our favorite movies. Time Warp, the Fandom Flashback podcast discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie and TV pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Union Federation, our Star Trek and Orville show. Hair Metal, the 80s and early 90s rock metal podcast. Type 40, our show covering the time-traveling Doctor Who universe with host Dan Hadley. Lethal Mullet, an 80s and 90s action film podcast with host Adam P. O'Brien. Also check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast with hosts Scott, Derek, and Nathan. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast, a deep dive into the final frontier with host Mark Newbold and Adam P. O'Brien. And check out our newest shows, The Fandom Show, our monthly Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube exclusive show about the month's hottest topics in fandom, and the FPN True Believers MCU podcast, discussing the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the related Marvel television and streaming MCU universe, including the connections to the original Marvel comics. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on several platforms. Please subscribe to the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel to receive notifications of new podcast episodes and live events. You can enjoy all of the Fandom Podcast Network audio podcasts on our master feed at fpnet.podbean.com. The Fandom Podcast Network is on all major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast and iTunes. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. You can also find the Fandom Podcast Network on Instagram at Fandom Podcast Network and on Twitter at FanPod Network. Thank you for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
And we're back discussing the latest episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, All Those Who Wander. A lot of great stuff going around the Fandom Podcast Network right now, Kevin, including real quick, I guess got to give you a shout out because Hair Metal's coming back.
Yes, it is. Recorded a great episode last night with good friend Murr from Raiders Fan Radio. We are celebrating the 35th anniversary of 1987, the year in rock metal albums. And some very iconic albums came out that year, including Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction. And we picked our top 5 rock metal albums of 1987. And we also picked our favorite rock metal album cover.
There we go, and that will be out soon on the Fandom Podcast Network. But let's get back into some Star Trek here. Kevin, not only are you our top-notch security officer, you bring the heat with the trivia, and you've got some trivia for this episode.
So the episode title is paraphrasing the popular saying coined by author J.R.R. Tolkien, not all who wander are lost. And just a little personal note that this rang true for me. When I was last in London and Scotland with my then beautiful fiance, Erin Gill, we were in London getting ready to do some shopping because we wanted to get some stuff for our hiking in the Highlands in Scotland. And she bought me this shirt that said, "Not all that wander are lost." And so that hit home with me, and I still have that shirt. And boy, did we have some time to ourselves to travel through Scotland and the Highlands. We didn't schedule anything. We just hiked when we wanted to hike. It's the best way to get through Scotland. The phrase was part of a larger poem in his 1954 novel, The Fellowship of the Ring. All that is gold does not glitter. Not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither. Deep roots are not reached by the frost. The novel was also made into several films. The most popular version being Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. I liked the extended version originally, but there you go. We learn in this episode that Captain Pike's command code is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Who do we appreciate?
Because of course it is that. Because it's Pike. And
I
this is what Pike does.
had a Spaceballs flashback. What's your code? 1, 2, 3, 4. I got a kick out of this, guys. It rang a bell, and now I know why. The Enterprise was heading to Deep Space Station K7, which featured prominently in the classic episode Trouble with Tribbles and the Deep Space Nine episode where they returned to that, Trials and Tribulations. Did anyone else get that, Davis?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I was really kind of hoping that they were going to do a B plot as well, and you would see like Station K7 along with number 1 and the rest of the crew, but okay, we didn't. But it would have been nice because, you know, they were doing double duty at that time. So I said, okay, maybe we might see something going on with them as well. But unfortunately, we did not. Yeah. One thing I will point out, though, is the name of the vessel that was stranded was the Peregrine. And in Greek, that means peregrinus, and that means foreigner or traveler.
Interesting. By the way, glad you brought that up, Davis. How cool was that shot of the ship like crash landed and sticking out like that? Creepy and cool, right?
Yes, it was very gothic. I mean, because of the point, because I was like, how did they crash that so perfectly? But what was it? Somebody said, what was it, Mbenga, or somebody said it was a scheduled crash landing, and so there's no such thing as a scheduled crash landing or something like that. But
I know, right?
I thought whoever landed it did a really good job landing that vessel.
Yeah. It was kind of like butt first, you know, so to speak, or nacelle first when you think about it. It was pretty good.
Yeah, and it was not a constitutional ship, was it?
I don't know, but it was a gorgeous. It was a gorgeous backdrop. It was really cool.
Absolutely.
Before the end, Hemmer gives a Vulcan salute to Spock and tells him to live long and prosper, much like Spock will do about 26 years later after making his own sacrifice to save the Enterprise crew. Also, much like Spock would himself do just prior to his first death, as he asked his friends to not weep for him. So there you go. The last bit of trivia basically goes into our away mission, saying the event on the Peregrine are basically a tribute to aliens and alien, bordering on a whole lot of reference, and we'll get into that, Kyle.
Yeah, in fact, we're going to get into that right now. It's time to activate the transporter and dive into our away missions. Okay, away mission number 1. No one can hear you scream. Kevin, I think you know where I'm getting that from.
Yeah.
This episode obviously pulled off many a classic sci-fi and horror film tropes. And we talked a little bit earlier about how Strange New World pulled this off. But there's a few things I want to hit more into. Kevin, you did some research into how this episode tied in with the Aliens franchise and the Predator franchise. And I want to talk about the Gorn, because the Gorn have been kind of the looming threat all season in one way or the other. And we get kind of our first look at them, not fully developed, but I want to ask you guys how you feel that the Gorn are being set up. But Kevin, I want you to dive into the trivia you researched up, comparing this episode to things that were in the Alien and the Predator franchises.
I have an unscheduled Audible, and if you're watching the video of this, visual that I want to share with you guys regarding the Gorn. Before I get into, and by the way, the tagline, "No one can hear you scream," the original tagline was "In space, no one can hear you scream," and that was the tagline for the original 79 Aliens. But speaking of aliens, we're talking about the classic Gorn here. And I wanted to share some pictures of the Gorn that we're used to. And back in the mid-90s, I started playing a collectible card game. Did Magic for a little bit, but it was Star Trek, the collectible card game, the CCG, that I started playing with my friends. that was made and produced by Decipher, and I ended up getting hired by Decipher, and I worked for them for like 5 or 6 years, promoting the Star Trek card game, as well as the Star Wars card game and the Lord of the Rings, 4-motion Lord of the Rings card game. Great time in my life, made some great friends. But the Gorn that we're all used to, remember that fight with Kirk down there? And it was filmed at the Vasquez Rocks there, just north of Hollywood. Well, this is the Gorn that we're all used to, guys, right there. Played by stuntman Bobby Clark, and lizard alien like their guy. We know who he is. And Davis, are you? I got to ask you. You're familiar with this character of the original series. Going now, and we're seeing a little bit different variation of it. How are you feeling about that?
I like it. I mean, I like the fact that we're finally delving into an alien culture and a species that we have not really taken the opportunity to go into it. I mean, I know there was a Star Trek Next Generation comic book graphic novel that had the Enterprise going to the Gorn homeworld, and I know some of the Star Trek literature over the past few years have talked about the Gorn, and there was something else that was dealing with the Gorn, but you know, you never really saw them like on the big screen except for that one time in the original series. So I like it. I mean, I think it's different. I think it's unique. I think it's a weird thing, I will say, that they spew their venom or whatever, and that's how they procreate. Was that correct?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, how crazy is that? I mean, I don't know about y'all, but if I was on that away team, I'd be a little freaked out right there. I mean, just because you're like, I got to stay away from him permanently, you know?
Yeah. Hey, Kevin, I just want to say something about version 1 of the Gorn. They're a little stiff. They're not much of a party animal, but their distant cousin, the Sleestack, those guys know how to party.
This is true. If you're watching the video, I've shared another interpretation of the Gorn, and this is also from the Star Trek collectible card game from the Star Trek Enterprise series, because we see this, and this is a picture of Slar, vicious Gorn slave master of the Tholian Assembly, who was assigned to gut the starship Defiant in the mirror universe. He does not trust Terrans. I wanted to share that because this is the evolution of the Gorn character, and players of this game obviously were happy to see this from the Enterprise series. Do you remember? Did you watch Enterprise, Davis? Do you remember this?
You know, now that you mention it, I think we did talk about the Gorn on Enterprise, but I just don't remember when. I remember the Tholians, and I thought it was very cool to actually see what a Tholian looked like on the big screen. I think that was the Mirror Universe ones, was it?
Right, yeah.
It's been a while since I've watched Enterprise. It's been a long road.
Well, for you Star Trek fans in Southern California, back in the 90s, they had a wonderful creation event called the Star Trek Grand Slam Conventions every year. And it was held at the Pasadena Convention Center. And I went to several of those. And it was really cool because, as we know, that classic fight scene was filmed at the Vasquez Rocks. And I got a chance to meet the actor Bobby Clark when I was working for Decipher, and we were then exhibiting at these conventions. So I was there actually as an employee for a game company when I was just a fan. I was going to it. And I went to WonderCon this year of 2022. And I was happy to come across Mr. Bobby Clark again in person. I have an original picture, which I don't have with me right now, but that's Bobby Clark there if you're watching the video here on YouTube. And great guy. And I remember when I met him originally, he was actually with his son. I can't remember his son's name, but he also was in business with building models and stuff. And he actually had a hand in working on the original Borg Cube model. Bobby Clark's son. And so, but I wanted to show a picture of Mr. Clark here. Great guy. I got him to sign a picture, and he was just great to chat with. And he remembered that event, those Star Trek conventions. So it was really, really nice. So got to give a tribute to the Gorn here, because in this episode, guys, they were not nice. So here's some reference to the Alien franchise. The crew following a distress call to find a crashed ship. That was from Alien and Alien Isolation. Finding
Which is
corpses.
the video game.
Yeah, the video
Which is
game.
the video
Thank
game.
you.
Yeah.
Finding corpse littered the ship. Alien Isolation game. Hemmer sacrifices near recreation of Ripley in Alien 3, sacrificing herself to die as a chest burster was coming out of her, basically. Lon searching for Oriana and taking her under her wing is a mirror to Ripley doing the same thing with Newt and Aliens. The emerging Gorn are pure white and quickly molt and grow, Alien reference. There are more than one per host, Alien versus Predator Requiem reference. One also emerges from Buckley's back, Alien Covenant reference. The Gorn like to use the vents to get around. We saw that a lot in Aliens. The vein-like pattern on Buckley's skin is similar to how humans are infected by the black goo look in the movie Prometheus, the prequel to Alien. In her eulogy, Ortegas remembers calling Hemmer a blue meanie when he scolded her for overworking the ship's engine. The way the Gorn see as they're chasing or hunting and make clicking noises is clearly an homage to Predator. And we see like the Gorn view, which gave us that Predator view as well. In that one TNG episode with the clicking, when the aliens are abducting them at night and doing stuff, that I kind of got that feeling as well. So regarding this kind of horror themed here, did the Gorn scare you, Davis?
No, they didn't scare me, but I thought it was very cool and unique how they actually portrayed them, because it was a very intense story. But at the same time, what I really loved about it is how the entire team worked together, as opposed to the Colonial Marines, like we talked about earlier, that they did not work together. They didn't want to listen to each other, but everyone had a job to do and everyone knew what to do. And so because of that, they were able to subdue that threat. Not going to lie, when Lon went in through that one little capsule and then they had to put the coolant on it or whatever, anything, that was pretty intense right there.
You froze up, yeah. Kyle, be honest, were you scared? Scared of the Gorn?
No, I wasn't necessarily scared of the Gorn, but I was impressed by the Gorn. And in this aspect of, these are just child Gorn. And look at the havoc and fear.
They eat each other as soon as they're born. Yeah. Like the alpha male was like, dude, you're out.
And so, again, I come back to something I've said a couple of times in this episode, is that I'm fascinated by the Gorn, because obviously we still haven't seen the full adult version of a Gorn yet. And how powerful and how a destructive force in nature that is. And you're seeing the wild young Gorn who's uncontrollable. What's a Gorn like that has come to its senses and can control itself a little bit and think, as long with the aspects of abilities that it has. So I'm really, really hoping that season 2, the Gorn are now going to be even considered more of a bigger threat, and we're going to actually see what's happening with them and how they executed the tropes within this episode. You knew exactly what you were seeing when you were seeing it, but it still worked because it wasn't, oh, we're stealing this. It felt like more, okay, we're paying homage to this. And that's what made it work so well. And like I said, I'm with Leon leaving the ship and going on her own mission involving the Gorn. I'm really looking forward to seeing what's going to happen there. I think there's some great stories coming in season 2 that involve the Gorn.
So when we were first introduced to the Gorn, Kirk and the Gorn, now this scene's kind of funny because it looks like, they could be friendly, just bros hugging it out. But rewatching this and seeing this scene, Davis, I want to ask you, now that you know how these guys come about, does this scene change for you? And like I said, if you're listening to this on the video here, I'm showing the original Kirk fighting the Gorn here. Does it help now? Does it change anything? Your perspective on the Gorn from the TOS episode, Davis?
Well, one thing that is different, as you can tell, they were both very close to each other, and he did not spit any of his acid on Kirk or anything. So that is one thing that was different. That is as opposed to the original series. But it just made me want to know more about them. If they're the bad guys, like say season 2, or they continue to grow as the bad guys, I say I'm all for it, just because after a while, seeing Klingons or seeing Romulans, it's time for another part of a Beta Quadrant or an Alpha Quadrant alien that is kind of a threat to the Federation. You would want to see them. I mean, how many times in TNG did we see Klingons or Romulans? But we've never really had the opportunity to see the Tholians and the Gorn really in action. And I know the other species that I think was talked about, the Zinkethi?
I think so. Yeah.
They talked about them a lot in Deep Space Nine as well, and I was hoping we might see them as well, but unfortunately we have not yet. But like I said, to wrap it all up, I do want to see the Gorn. I want to see more of what they do. I want to see them interacting. I want to see how they're going to be operating a ship. I want to see them. I want to see more.
Kyle, before we head to mission 2, do you have any more thoughts on the Gorn here?
Just bring me more Gorn. I'm very intrigued at this point, and I give them a lot of credit for how they've done this. And I think there's a lot more questions that we need answered when it comes to the Gorn as well.
Can I be honest with you guys? First of all, I was a little scared. I'll be honest. I'm not a big horror guy, but you guys apparently weren't scared. You guys are emotionally dead inside. That's fine. I wasn't. But I got to tell you, seeing the original Gorn and having the Gorn action figure somewhere in my collection and meeting Bobby Clark, I was kind of hoping young Gorn would just be cuter and maybe not necessarily have it like as a pet, but being able to go, oh, look at the baby Gorn. I want to pet you. My opinion has changed.
Yeah. You think?
No, my Gorn babies, you're all you, man. I'd rather have a Gorn. I'd rather go up against a Gorn, full male Gorn, full female Gorn than the Gorn babies. I'm out.
I'll tell you what, Kevin, after the episode, I will have you do a Zoom call with Lieutenant Duke. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Never mind. Too soon?
I didn't get the reference.
The Lieutenant Duke was the ensign who got promoted, and then the Gorn.
See, I already forgot his name, so I didn't get it. Davis, you wanted to say something?
Well, just to add on to what Kyle said, Lieutenant Duke was not wearing a red shirt either. Hey-o. But I have to wonder as well if the Gorn that we see in Strange New Worlds, as opposed to the Gorns that we see in the original series, are they the same ones, or are they a subspecies, or just like how the Andorian have I might mispronounce the word, Ananar?
Yeah.
Ananar. Mm-hmm. I mean, Ananar. But I have to wonder if they're a little bit like
Romulans, Remans. Yeah, I got you.
Exactly. Yeah, so, it'd be interesting to see more, and I hope that's where they're going, is to be able to see more of the Gorn.
Just like get Kirk Gorn a hug, I mean, he fought with honor, Look at him. You just want to rub his ears. Okay, maybe it's just me. All right.
Before Kevin goes full Gorn on us here, I'm going to hit the transporter again because it's time for away mission number 2. Okay, guys, as it has been all season, it's getting to know your crew. Well, it's a little twist this week. It's saying goodbye to your crew. We lost Timmer this week, guys. Probably the one character that really hasn't had his full dedicated episode. Even this episode had other people who were getting a bit of the spotlight as well. It was kind of split, but the reason I wanted to focus on Hemmer is because we haven't really gotten to know him other than a few really, I think, fun moments. But I was so fascinated by this character, and I just feel like the writers pull a fast one on us. They gave us this really intriguing character, but they never dove deep into him because we knew we were losing him. So it kind of leaves some mystery around the character. I'm curious to, first and foremost, for each of you, Davis, I'll start with you. Did they kill Hemmer off too fast?
I don't think so. I think they actually I think he actually served his purpose. And when I say that is because him and Uhura were connected in some ways. And for her to say, yeah, I'm going to leave Starfleet. I'm not going to do this. But he was the catalyst that actually, because of his sacrifice, she stays on. I mean, so I think we may not have got to see a lot of Himmler, but at the same time, he had a purpose, and I think he fulfilled it. I mean, unless we see him in flashbacks or whatnot. But I mean, I hate to see him go, but at the same time, I think that's pretty daring to be able to say, hey, we've got this new character. However, he's not going to last long.
Kevin, I'm asking you the same question, but I'm going to add a little caveat to this, because we know with Strange New Worlds we're eventually leading to the original series. Does this give them a lot more leeway to do things like this with characters they introduce throughout Strange New Worlds until we get to the point where it becomes the original series?
Yeah, it's smart. And I think even though this is episodic television again, it's not this strict story arc that they have to stick with all season like we got with Star Trek Picard and we're getting with every season of Discovery. In the beginning, they're like, we need to introduce someone that's interesting enough for people to care about, but we have to kill them off later because we have other ideas we want to do for season 2 if we get there. And I'm sure that, like, when they were thinking about the character of Hemmer, I think they were like, we got to find the right actor for it. And Bruce Horrick is awesome as Hemmer. We got to give him something. I love the fact that Lacey Bauer says that he actually looks alien, and he was one of the crew members, but they didn't give us too much. They gave us just enough. But I'm going to say that it would have been nice if maybe we got a flashback or a little bit more about him getting into Starfleet more, whether his own trials and stuff like that, and maybe some family members or something like that. It might have made the death scene even more a little gut wrenching. So I don't know. I'm kind of with Grayson on this. I think that Davis, you did a great way. You kind of said, I think he served his purpose, but not to be like, rude about it. That now there's a spot to fill in a very important part of a ship's crew. He sacrificed himself. He convinced another crew member that this is where you need to be. And his death was affected by the rest of the crew as well. Did I answer the question, Kyle? I've kind of forgot now.
I think it.
I started getting into it because I was just like, Hemmer, we barely knew him, but I think we knew enough.
I think it does answer the question, Davis. You look like you had something you wanted to add into what Kevin was saying.
Yeah, I remember Aaron Alston, who actually wrote some of the Rogue Squadron novels.
Yeah,
he was
great writer.
Yes, he was, absolutely. And I was in a question and answer session with him one time, and I asked him, I said, how do you feel about killing off characters? Is it really that important to do that? And from what I remember him saying was, if it serves the purpose of the story, then yes. And honestly, I mean, seeing how Himmler was and seeing how he actually bonded with Uhura to help her, that was a fulfilling of a purpose. Now, mind you, I don't know if Lieutenant Kirk or Ensign Kirk's going to be a lot in the next season, or if he's just in a couple episodes, because I really hope they have a long term with Strange New Worlds, because they have at least 10 years before all those Starfleet cadets are at that age where Pike sacrifices himself. So I really hope we see more of this crew. And maybe if we see more crew members coming in and out, it actually shows that they will be able to, how was it in Deep Space Nine, where you might see a character one season and they might not reappear until 2 seasons later, and they come back and, they have another storyline because, their story is not complete.
Yeah.
And I love that idea, to being able to not necessarily just kill off the character and be done with it, but actually be able to if this character leaves for a little while, he comes back and they've grown, or they have more of a character arc story that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the things with the Hammer is because I found the character so fascinating, and I thought there was a lot of story to tell with him. I really would have liked to have a chance to see an episode with him and Spock and really understand their relationship more and what bonded those two together. Like they came across every time they were on the screen together. I think that there's some Hammer stories I would like to have seen, but I agree with you, Davis. It served its purpose, and I think it also opens people's eyes to make you think. There's probably nobody who's 100% safe on this show if they're not part of that, if we don't know their history completely. And so I think that adds to it as well. And what I would like to see them do is, I know it's a little bit of a trope, but Kevin, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. You always have that one position. Sometimes these shows have this one character or one position that every season it's a new person in that position. Like it's like the jinxed position, you know?
Oh, you mean like Spinal Tap's drummer?
Yeah, exactly. If that maybe that's what we do with the chief engineer of the Enterprise until Scotty pops in.
No, I don't know. Star Trek, in Next Gen, we lost Tasha Yar. She had a little more burn before Hemmer, and before she died. And then we got Worf. If this is to open the door to Scotty, let it happen. But I wouldn't be surprised and I wouldn't be disappointed if they have someone else come in before Scotty. Then it becomes that cursed position, maybe. Davis, you had a comment?
Yes, you remember on the very first season of TNG, there was 4 chief engineers on the Enterprise. It was like McDougal and a couple other ones, and finally,
that's right, McDougal.
Yeah, and a couple of them get killed off or something like that, and one of them, I think, in a story, Trek literature, they retire or something. But Geordi takes over, of course. But it's at that same time where you don't have that same person there. But I'm trying to remember, and maybe y'all can help me, but I don't remember ever having Scotty working with Pike.
Yeah, maybe.
I personally would like to see somebody else just as cool or as Himmler or somebody different, because if we see Scotty next, he's the next engineer. Okay, yeah, that's fine, no big deal. But if we see other characters that may come in, and because I personally, if I was a writer, if we bring in another person, we can't just kill him off. Maybe we transfer him and somebody else comes in, like I talked about, like rotating characters, and might come back in another ship or another thing of that sort, because you want to have that overall character development, so to speak. So,
right.
It's interesting times, and it makes for fun conversation for Strange New Worlds, because I think that's what gives the show its uniqueness, because we know what's coming, but it's just a matter of what's the journey to get there. And that's what's fascinating, I think, is that we have such fascinating characters for Strange New Worlds, and we know their journey, but we don't know their journey to get there. And I think that's what the aspect of Strange New Worlds that draws a lot of people in is what are these stories to get to where we're going. And I think that's always what makes it fascinating. But before we get out of here and wrap things up, gentlemen, any final thoughts or anything that we may have not discussed that you want to add? Mr. Grayson, you first.
I will say, like I said earlier, Strange New Worlds has been the Star Trek that I didn't think I wanted, but I needed. And I know it's a silly cliche, of course, but it's always exciting to be able to go, oh, there's a new episode. I want to watch it. Oh, there's a new episode. And, I've even waited like a couple of weeks just to watch 2 of them at one time. It's just been a refresh to me, because it's, like I said, there's a lot of rich characters on board, and, there's already characters that of. And it says credit to the writing staff that they're willing to take that chance to take out or kill off a character to help motivate and move the story along. And I really, truly hope that this carries on more than the original series, 3 seasons. I hope it continues on for 5 or 7 seasons, or as long as they have great good character development and great stories, I am all for it. I mean, it's funny that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't remember seeing so far in Strange New Worlds any Klingons. Have we seen any?
They've been mentioned, but we haven't seen any.
Yeah.
Just mentioned.
I mean, that's actually says something of itself for not having an iconic character, iconic aliens to come back, you know, but we have something that's new now. It's the Gorn. I mean, I say bring on the Tholians, bring on, like we talked about, the Zenkethi. I mean, bring on other threats that could pose, you know, different, you know, emergencies to happen. So
Kevin, what about you? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I got a couple here. First of all, I forgot to mention this in the Orville podcast that we did for Union Fed. If you're a Star Trek fan, you're listening to this and you haven't been watching the Orville because you think it's a Star Trek ripoff or whatever, give it a shot. This third season has been wonderful, and I was getting ready to watch it. You know, it comes out technically at like 9:00 Pacific time on Wednesday, and then usually most people see it on Thursday. I was getting ready to go to bed because I had to get up early for work, and say, I'll watch the first few minutes of the Orville, this new episode that Kyle and I talked about, and it was the longest episode of the entire series, and it kept me watching. And I lost sleep last night because of the Orville, or the other night, just so you know. Back to this episode of Strange New Worlds. A shout out to that scene with Mbega and the little girl. I've been waiting for Lon to soften up a little bit. You know, this security chief badassness that she's been doing has been awesome, but I've been wanting to see another side of her. And I did. We saw her, you know, her fear of the Gorn, and we got a little tease of that earlier in the season. Like, what is it about the Gorn? Why is she? And we found out why. But the scene with her and Pike was great, and the support that Pike was showing. And I love the fact that she was able to call him Chris. And right before she left, and we saw some great sides of her there. And then the scene when Uhura walks out onto the bridge and the camera's behind her from the inside the turbo lift, and you see number one sitting in the chair, and you see her kind of look down over to the right, looking at the communication station, and just giving that look, knowing as Star Trek fans that she is going to be a staple of that iconic ship at that location.
Yeah, no, some great moments, and I echo your thoughts on the Orville, and I actually think a lot of that applies to Strange New Worlds. I think Strange New Worlds is must-see television. Every episode has pulled me in and enthralled me. It's not something that, I feel like I can pause this and walk away from it and then come back to it. It brings me in, and it brings me into this world, and it gives me fun and happiness and truly a brightness, and that's something I've felt missing from Trek for a while. So,
and one last thing. Let's just remind the people of the cute, cuddly Gorn we saw in TOS, because now he's not so. He's not now. It's not that scary. Look at that, Kirk and the Gorn. There we go. We miss him. We'll see him again.
Yeah.
I do have one thing to ask y'all.
Yes.
Out of the 3 Star Treks that we have seen, Discovery, Picard, and now Strange New Worlds, which of the 3 do you think has the most rewatchability?
That's Strange New Worlds.
Strange New Worlds, hands down, baby. And this has been a point of discussion, especially during our Discovery podcast. And I came out and said that one of the things that, as you guys may know me or not, and Kyle knows me, I judge movies and TV on rewatchability. And when the last season of Discovery ended, I said, Discovery does not have any rewatchability appeal for me. I don't see myself watching it unless I had to do a podcast about an episode or something. And Star Trek Picard moments, maybe, but Strange New Worlds is completely rewatchable for the return of episodic Star Trek television and great character development and stories.
Kevin brings up a good point, and I think one of the reasons why Strange New Worlds is also so rewatchable is because it's episodic television. you can go back and watch an episode. You don't feel like you're jumping back into the middle of a story, and you might have to go back and remind yourself of certain things.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things when you can watch Strange New Worlds and basically say, I can jump into any episode and not feel completely lost. Whereas I think both Picard and Discovery have that problem. And what I'm really hoping is they've seen what's been going on with Strange New Worlds. Picard we knew was a finite story arc. We knew we were getting 3 seasons. But maybe they use this to at least alter Discovery. And I'm not saying Discovery needs to get rid of overarching storylines, but maybe instead of one that arches over through the entire season, a couple episode storylines, and give us a couple bottle episodes. Learn from what people are loving about Strange New Worlds and apply it to Discovery.
If I was given the power of the Paramount execs, I would say, Discovery, do what Strange New Worlds is doing. That's what I would say.
Yeah. Well, the guy who's was on Head of the Class is now the CEO, right?
Sorry?
What's his name? He was on Head of the Class.
Brian Robbins?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, he was the forget which Eric.
He was Eric. Yeah, he was the one who the misfit one.
Oh,
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
He's head of Paramount now.
Last time I checked, yeah. Unless something's changed.
So he's literally head of the class.
Pretty much, yeah. So
wow, that's cool.
My 2 thoughts on that when I asked about rewatchability, I will say just real quickly, Discovery, I enjoyed when they went to the future, and I really want to see more of the exploration style with that. Picard, I like the overall just 3 seasons, and that's it. It's a nice, compact story. It'd be great. But Strange New Worlds has done it really well for me.
Yeah. Brian Robbins is the CEO of Paramount Pictures. He became the CEO of Paramount Pictures in September of 2021.
Interesting timing.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, well, with that, guys, it's time to intercept some subspace signals. First of all, thanks to the wonderful crew for this great episode of the Union Federation podcast. Kevin, as always, it's a joy to be working with you on all of the podcasts we do here at the Fandom Podcast Network. But Mr. Grayson, it's wonderful you've come home, because this is, as I tell everybody who comes on there, this is always a home for you. We've missed you on podcasts. We're hoping to get you on some more things here very soon. But, the door is always open for you to come talk Trek or whatever you want to talk about. It's been a pleasure to have you back on the Union Federation podcast.
Thank you so much. I do appreciate it. And I always love talking about Trek with you guys. And it was so much fun. And I really enjoyed to be able just to share my thoughts about this great new Star Trek we have.
Great to have you
Kevin,
on.
Yeah. If we put Davis and Norman on a podcast together, would the podcasting world just break because of the sound of their voices?
Yeah, there'd be a whole lot of sexiness going on there. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we'd have to put that on a whole new category on iTunes. Just saying.
I think it's time to take us out.
Of course, you can find the Fandom Podcast Network and the Union Federation on our wonderful Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, share us out. You can also find all of the audio versions of these shows in our podcast format on our master feed at fpnet.podbean.com. Of course, they are also on all major podcast catchers, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and of course, to our partnership with the BQN. You can find all of our this great show and some of the great shows of the BQN here on our Fandom Podcast Network as well. So we're having great fun there. To visit our Union Federation Facebook page, we keep a lot of things going on there, try to keep you updated on what's happening with the Trek and the Orville. You can visit the Union Federation Podcast on Twitter at UnionFedPod, and also on Instagram at Union Federation Podcast. You can email us directly at the unionfederation@gmail.com. You can find me, Kyle, on Twitter at AKyleW or on Instagram at AKyleFandom. Kevin, where can people catch you on some hailing frequencies on social media?
Obviously, our Union Federation Facebook group, also under my name on Facebook, but you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Spartan_Phoenix.
Also, you can find the lovely Haley Stoddard on Twitter at Trekkie01D, and Amy, of course, on Twitter at Miss Amy Nelson. Mr. Grayson, before you give out your social media handles, I just must say, if you follow this man on Instagram, this man is a genius with custom figures, and his Instagram is worth a follow because not only is his figure work amazing, his photography work is absolutely stunning.
Clarifying, when you say figures, you mean toys as well.
Yeah, action figures, yes. I don't know. He's working a svelte figure. I'm just saying. But, Davis, where can people find you on social media?
Well, you humble me by saying how great my action figure photography is. I do appreciate that. I actually, you can find me at Springer_2017 on Instagram. And you can also find me at one of my new areas that I'm actually working on right now, building different worlds with different world creators for action figure photography. Peregrine_outpost on Instagram.
Nice.
Peregrine. That sounds
Peregrine.
familiar.
I wonder.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. A little
sounds
symmetry
familiar
there. Yeah.
And of course, if we look ahead on the Orb of Prophecy, we will be looking at the season finale, guys, of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, A Quality of Mercy. I can't believe we're already done. I can't believe we're already to the final episode of this season of Strange New Worlds. We'll be talking about that episode and Strange New Worlds as a whole in the season overall. And two, the Orville is still going strong. It's only halfway through its run. Twice in a Lifetime is the next episode of the Orville. Kevin will be in the captain's chair for that episode of Union Federation as well. It's been an absolute blast with everybody here. I just want to speak for cuteness. We have hiding back here the cuteness of the true Fandom Podcast Network mascots, Tummy and Stripesy, Kevin, just so you know what.
Yeah, you got your own little furry tribbles over there that say meow.
Yeah.
And give me belly rubs and head rubs.
Yeah. Soft kitty fur, much nicer than green lizardy scales.
I'm sorry. They're really cute, but this guy's cute too. Captain Kirk. I'm just gonna say. Look at that. I mean, look at that. How cute he is.
But they don't spit venom. That's going to knock you up. I'm just saying. Thank you again to all the listeners out there. Avoid corn eggs. It's just not good for you. Until next time, thank you for listening. And hailing frequencies are now closed.